Western religion did was to attack African spirituality so that you lost your connection to God, because in many African communities, the connection between man and God was a direct thing, and you had your ancestors interceding for you, which they... Impact of slavery is something that must be seen from two different fronts. From the perspective of the enslaver, it was one of the most lucrative industries, if you may, that they ever undertook. If you look at the history of Europe, the history of America, to mean the United States of America, to mean Latin America or South America, you will discover that those civilizations were built on the back of slaves. But to the slave, it was debilitating and humiliating, and the impact is alive today. And the impact, it is not only economic, it is spiritual, it is cultural, it is political, it is total. And one need only see what happened to the slaves who were taken to the United States of America. First of all, you lost your language. And I think Alex Haley has done a very good job in dramatizing it through his movie Roots. They took away your name. They took away your God. They took away your language. They took away all the things that you valued. And if you go to Latin America, you also discover, you go to Colombia, you go to Brazil, you see how devastating it was. You go to the Caribbean, whether it's St. Kitts and Nevis, or whether Trinidad and Tobago, Antigua and Barbuda, St. Lucia, St. Vincent and Grenadines, you see the impact of slavery. And not only that, if you move out of the slavery that we call the transatlantic triangle, and you go into the Arab world, where we now know that over 18 million people were transported, and we now know that men were castrated, you can see how they have completely been Arabized, so that they do not even think of their African roots. That is how devastating slavery was. And the impact continues, because once you have lost your all, you've lost your humanity. To claim it back, it is an intergenerational thing. We now know quite a number of people who suffered in the manner that they did and continue to suffer, trying to reconnect with their root. The DNA tracing is in itself a quest for people to find themselves so that they can be who they were and so that they can pay homage to their ancestors. The continent remains the richest continent on earth in terms of many things. And whenever people talk about riches, we are quick to talk about natural resources. But to me, the most important of the resources is the human resource. Africa was invaded and people were enslaved because of the human resource. In fact, I know of a story about slavery in Costa Rica, where the Spaniards were trying to build a railway from Port Limon to San Jose in Costa Rica. And they tried the Chinese, they died of malaria. They tried everybody until they went to Jamaica and picked the slaves who had been there, and they are the ones who came and built the railway to Port Limon because of human resource before industrialization. If you look at every other sector, look at the sugar plantations of Sao Tome, off the coast of Angola and the Democratic Republic of Congo. They took people from the Congo Kingdom and took them to Sao Tome. The rubber plantations, human resource. Africa was rich and still remains rich. But what Africa is famed for is her natural resources. Talk of gold, talk of iron ore, talk of cobalt, talk of uranium, talk of rare earth, talk of copper, talk of all these things, talk of timber. even in terms of looking at our flora and fauna, and you look at what we have in terms of what gives the world the pharmaceutical products. It was true then, it is true now. And that is why when the European powers came to the continent of Africa and they were fighting each other, remember they were fighting each other in different corners of Africa. In Angola, the Dutch were fighting the Portuguese. In the other part, the Germans were fighting, the French were fighting, the colonialists were fighting. And then they said, why are we fighting? This hunting ground is so rich that we had just better divide it into spheres of influence. That is the context in which the conference in Berlin that was put together by Otto von Bismarck must be understood. So they divided into spheres of influence because of the riches. Even the decolonization process the colonization process before decolonization was based on the better management of the resources, so that the human resource continue to be a resource, but we're also using the natural resources to industrialize Europe. The Europe that we now see industrialized did so on the back of African resources. The America that we now see industrialized did so on the back of African resources. The Latin America. So Africa has been the place where you get resources and take it to other parts of the world, particularly Europe and America, and use it for purposes of the benefit. And to that extent, Africa has been impoverished. So that Africa is the least industrialized of all the continents, because at critical moments, both her people and her resources have been taken away, and all her attempts at industrialization have been frustrated to the extent that they have not realized their potential. So the impact is huge. But that does not mean that Africa is poor. Africa, with a population of 1.4 billion and increasing, the youngest population in the world, with most of the resources already still resident in the continent of Africa, we only have to change our mind and stop exporting raw products or primary products and begin to have them made here, value addition. Then sooner rather than later, we will be flying on a different plane in terms of converting our resources into things that will improve the quality of our lives. The paradox of Africa is so rich, yet so poor. A paradox. It used to be said, and it was right, that the flag followed the cross. That is as regards Christianity. And as Europe and America were subdividing Africa for economic reasons, they were also subdividing Africa from a religious perspective. So that when you look at Africa, you see the Catholic Church, the Roman Catholic Church to be specific, is one of the largest landowners across the continent of Africa. In every African country, the Roman Catholic Church has large tracts of land. They are a sphere of influence, whether you are talking about their presence in Uganda or in Kenya or in Angola or in all those other countries. Remember, the Roman Pope was a politician. And in the 15th and 16th century, when the oceans were being subdivided for exploration, it is the Roman Catholic Pope who divided the oceans between Spain and Portugal at that time. That is the Roman Catholic Church. The Anglican Church, whenever you saw the British, they also came with the Anglican Church. And remember, I keep on reminding those who are in the Anglican tradition that the Anglican Church was created through a rebellion. In 1534, when King Henry VIII was denied the right to annul his marriage to Catherine of Aragon so that he could marry Anne Boleyn. And he became the head of the Roman Catholic Church. The British monarch is the head of the Roman Catholic Church. So this is an established church. Wherever they went, you see the governor's house, and next to the governor's house is the archbishop's house. Either it's in Kenya or in Uganda or in Tanzania, or in Ghana, or in Nigeria, or in Zimbabwe, spheres of influence. And where the Germans were dominant, you see the Lutheran Church. And where the Scots had a presence, you see the Presbyterian Church. So it is true that religion was used. And the Bible has been used in very negative ways. The Dutch Reformed Church, which gave the religious legitimacy to the apartheid regime in South Africa, proceeded on the premise that the races were unequal. So religion was used to dehumanize the black South Africans by the Dutch Reformed Church, which founded and formed the so-called spiritual basis for the apartheid regime. The churches were there when people were being colonized. They were there when people were being discriminated against, while the same Bible that they read said that there is no Jew, no Gentile, no man, no woman. Yet they allowed it to happen. The religion was used to pacify, and the culture and the whole idea of turn the other cheek. Religion did not preach being a keeper of one's brother or sister. Religion did not assert that we should be good Samaritans. The people in religion became bad Samaritans. And it is instructive that in the recent past, the Roman Catholic Church has apologized. The Anglican Church has apologized because they know that they were complicit both in slavery and in colonization, and that they continue to do harm in the name of religion. Islam is not innocent. Islam, which is articulated in the Quran, is quite clear about the things and how you should deal with people. But Islam also became an instrument of Arabization, which was not what the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, prescribed. But those who are bringing Islam to the coastal part of Africa also used it to Arabize the population. The net effect, therefore, when you talk about the impact and the influence of religion in the continent of Africa, is that it is part of the problem. And one of the things that Western religion did was to attack African spirituality, so that you lost your connection to God, because in many African communities, the connection between man and God was a direct thing, and you had your ancestors interceding for you, which they said was unchristian, but yet when you are Christian, you pray to the God of Abraham, Moses, and Joseph, who are their ancestors, and they tell us we must not mention our ancestors when we are praying. So it is true that one of the things that attacks spirituality and creates a distance between us and God is organized religion, which we now know by dint of history, and even as we observe today, has some of the most corrupt practices, some of the most pernicious practices against men. We have seen cultic religions which have come where individuals become rich at the expense of their congregants.